you're sitting there and your body is uncomfortable. So even if you think to yourself, I'm going to surrender to this, there's discomfort there. So it's like, why would you take my advice, surrendering to discomfort? Like, your energy just wants to move away from that discomfort. And the reason there's discomfort in your body is because there's been many years of seeking to avoid who and what you truly are. And you've been trying to be the perfect person for this imagined outside world. And you've been ignoring what and who you are and your flow is. And you've been living in this mental reality. Day after day, you've been doing things you don't want to do because you believe that that's what you have to do. Day after day, you're telling other people what they have to do. Not because you believe it, but because you've been told that's what you have to do. So you're always living in a mental reality. You know, me and Khaleesi are out walking. When she's really thirsty, she can find the water. And I'm not sure how she does it, most probably through smell. But there's just this natural instinct. And every time she does it, it always reminds me of the conundrum of being human. Is that we're taught from a very young age that the intellect rules natural instinct. The intellect wins over natural instinct. And so we're told to put the intellect as king. This is king. We're even told that who we are is found in the intellect. We are somebody that moves in time. We are somebody that's good or bad, or right or wrong, happy, sad, fat, thin, tall, short. We're all these descriptions, and these all belong in the intellect. And we kind of cut ourselves off from the rest of the body, so we kind of become these walking heads, or these walking eyes, and we ignore what the rest of the body's saying. And then in our intellectual idea of ourselves, we begin to assess the situation, realize we like pleasure over pain, and then we obsess about always having this sensation of pleasure. And we believe that this sensation of pleasure is going to one day be enough pleasure, we're going to get a big enough hit, we're going to line up all our cards correctly, and we will feel complete. We will suddenly feel like we can stop seeking for pleasure. But actually the opposite happens. The more that you seek for pleasure, the bigger and bigger the seeking becomes, just like a drug addict. The more and more the drug addict wants, but it's never satisfied. And then by the time you get to these talks, I notice now there's the younger people that are coming to the talks, like a lot younger people arriving. But normally by the time you've arrived at these talks, the reason you have is because of suffering, is because you feel uncomfortable. And you've looked in the regular places that society has told you. And you've come to the conclusion that that isn't it. That's failed you, that's not worked. But for some reason, you've come to the conclusion that this now is the answer. And what you want me to do is you want me to talk, or you want me to give you a hit, or you want this magic, or you want a way of life. I notice that a lot of people that come to non-duality, they want it as a way of life. They've become tired of their old life, so they're now looking for a new life. So the guru and the ashram is very satisfying, which isn't a bad thing. But it's a game again. It's always games. Of now this new life that you want to live, you want to be non-dual. So living in the ashram or the community or living with like-minded people is the next thing that will complete you. And that's okay to do that. I'm not against it. I'm so lucky that I was so adamant to get to the bottom of this, because I found a really amazing, I went to lots of different teachers, and did lots of different things. And then I found a really amazing boyfriend who just kept repetitively pointing out to me my seeking patterns, and I couldn't escape them. It was like living for 3 years in the house of mirrors. And it's not so much about him, although I would love to say it's all about him. That's very much the English personality of being humble. But it wasn't. It was my ability to keep surrendering to that. The next person might have run away at them doing that. It's really intense having someone pointing out your issues all the time. It's not easy. And the way it worked between us is that he wouldn't take on any issues that I pointed out about him, which was actually a blessing for me. I don't know if it was a blessing for him, but it was a blessing for me because it meant that I didn't have to deal with any of his stuff. It just meant that I could look at my stuff and I didn't get lost in trying to convince him he needed to do this or do that. He quite quickly wouldn't buy into any of my stories about him, so I had to look at myself. And for 3 years I did that. And I didn't see this overall picture flying high in the sky. I didn't know where it was leading, but I followed my heart. I followed the flow of this instrument. I didn't even know at the time that I was doing that or to trust that. But now looking back, I can see that this instrument was obsessed with the subject and it just followed that which it was drawn to, no matter how painful that was. But normally when you get into this subject, and I used to do it as well, you want the teacher to just give you a magic pill, like kiss you on the head, the forehead, or look you in the eyes. Or you want them to give you the perfect intellectual solution, so you think that one day you'll understand them and that will be it. So you just got to put effort into understanding. Or you think being in their presence, their energy will be it, or all these different things, or the next retreat. And there's nothing wrong with thinking that, but that's only thoughts. But really what this subject is about is becoming yourself again. And who you truly are is beingness, is this empty beingness that's experiencing itself as everything. This no thing that's experiencing it as everything. If you like the word consciousness, then you could use the word perception, as long as that's not seen as something that's separate from things, and that it's empty and full simultaneously. And that beingness is experiencing itself through the human dream, through the human form. So in the human form, so there's the movement back to beingness, seeing that you're not the human, and then that allows in the human form, the human to be itself. So it's like a double edge. So you have the beingness moving back to that freedom, and then on the human form, it allows the human to be as it is, rather than living in its story of what it should be. It just is as it is. So I'm also a writer, which I express, and you can see it on my website. I write scripts, and I have done for many years. And I know when I'm writing my best stuff, it's when it's just flowing out. It just flows. And I know to put the pen down when I begin to think about it too much. And so when you wake up, there is that movement back in the human form to totally allow that human form to flow as it is. And since this energetic shift here, there's still a process working itself out of flowing in that human form, because for so many thousands of years as humans we've been convinced to be something else than what we are. And then also I'm still living in an identified society, so it's like sometimes I stumble by listening to other people's bullshit and believing it or something, like so I'll get convinced that something else is right when your body knows that that's not true. So maybe somebody's lying to you and the flow says that's not true, but I like to be quite a practical person. Without evidence, I don't like to be too pushy and insist that I'm right or anything like that. So those are the sort of places where I still tumble a little bit of being myself in interactions with other humans, because other humans have so many games they play. They can be confusing and they can confuse things, but most of the time there is just this following the energy of the body. So if the body wants to lie down, it tries to get itself in a situation where it doesn't feel blackmailed to do something else. It just trusts its natural flow, and then when the energy comes up to work, the energy comes up to work, and it works. It really does. To really trust that flow. We've always been taught that we have to be something in time, and so we're following the intellect. No, I must work now, I must fight this tiredness, I must be this, I must be that. But what happens is that maybe because you feel quite uncomfortable, because you've got a strong identity, you can't hear that flow. So then if you've got discomfort arising and there's not that natural flow of things, then just look at the discomfort and see what's going on in the body. And you don't have to act out of your strong neurosis all the time. So if you feel fear, you don't have to run away and try to get an answer to that fear. Or if you feel jealousy, you don't have to run away and try to stop somebody making you jealous or whatever it is. Just allow it to come up. And if you don't do that, if you go and act out, that's perfect too. But just explore what's happening. And none of it's personal. This isn't anybody's fault. Life is just a happening. It's not somebody that's driving this. I know, like, I sound like sometimes I'm implying somebody's driving this and someone could do something or not do something, but please believe me when I say everything that I'm saying is description, not prescription. There is no prescription here. So I can say to you, put your finger on your nose, and you might believe you're putting your finger on your nose, but I know 100% there is nobody in that body putting a finger in the nose. The body is just responding and putting its finger on its nose. And now on your lips. Now on your head. And you can do this. We can just have how many people are online with their finger on their head. to just let everything happen. Here it is. And there's a belief that you are inside here and that you can let it happen and that you exist looking at my image, but this isn't true. There is simply looking happening. There's simply experiencing happening. And as that dissolving of you happens more and more, what will happen on the human side is it'll just be this spontaneous action from love. It'll just be an act of love. And who you are won't be trying to complete itself by its actions, by what it does, by where it's going. It just does it. The body's set up to move towards pleasure. That's the way these mammals work. We don't walk into the burning fire. But none of it will complete you. Completion is where everything's coming from in this moment. And don't be fooled. We're so easily fooled by ourselves and by advertising. By the advertising of others, by the advertising of society, of what a spiritual person looks like, of what an enlightened person looks like, of what you have to do, what you have to behave like. The mind is just full of trickery. It's only interested in telling stories because it believes it'll get something from that story. It's not that that story is true. So say if you're looking at me now and you think I'm the master of all teachers, which is more than likely true. I'm sure that's what every one of you are thinking. Yep, she is definitely the master. She's above Muji, she's above Rupert, she's above Gengaji. She's definitely the master. And what was I saying? Yeah. And so your mind is telling you that story. So it's telling you that I'm the master of all speakers. Now, do you think it's telling you that story because it's objective reality, or do you think it's telling you that story because you get something from that story? And when it tells you, and when you tell yourself that story, it either brings about pleasure or pain. Maybe it makes you feel bad about yourself, like you're not enough. Or maybe it makes you feel good about yourself. Most stories that you're telling that aren't practical are about you and how it fits into your life. And this isn't meant to be a beat up or telling you you're wrong or bad in any way. I mean, you're very welcome to say I'm the master of all masters. Very welcome. But I'm just trying to point out the illusions that go on. Often there's a point to me pointing it out. Like there's a point where the seeker doesn't want to know anymore because the seeker still has an investment to an extent in non-duality or in the teacher or in the teachings. And this isn't saying stop listening or don't think I'm the master of all masters. I'm just trying to point out games that happen in the mind. So your mind is always analysing everything as to what it gets. So say if you're telling yourself the story that you're nearly there or that you're never going to arrive at enlightenment, it's that the mind is only telling you not because that's an objective reality or because it knows, it doesn't know. It's telling you that because it wants to maintain a story about you. And so it's feeling negative, it's feeling pain in its body, and it wants to validate that pain through a story. So it comes up with that story. There is fear happening in the body, so it puts that story on. we always take them to have some reality. Say if you're falling in love, and we all tut at our friends, you know, when somebody's falling in love, they're the one, they're the best, they really understand me, they understand, so if you're into non-duality, they understand this is no relationship, that there is nobody in relationship, and they're the love of my life, whatever it is. And all of us, like, when somebody's telling us that, inside we're like, not because we're bad or negative, but because we all know it's bullshit. They're just getting high from telling themselves that story. And that's okay. Go for it. Get yourself high from telling that story. But know that all stories come with opposites. So at some point in your relationship, you're going to feel the opposite about them. One story always comes with another story. And you can't control whether they're positive or negative. It's just neural pathways in the brain that go into loops. And in order to know it's the best relationship, you've judged all these other relationships as not being the best. So therefore, you've got an investment in bad relationships as well. So when you're saying mine's the best relationship and you're investing in the opposite story equally. And your mind will flip between the two opposites. Non-duality is coming home to what you truly are and seeing your freedom beyond stories. So if you have an investment that you've got the best teacher, you'll also flip into thinking they're the worst teacher as well. Might happen rapidly that you flip in and out of best, worst, best, worst. It might happen when you find out that their sexuality likes sleeping around or something. That's normally what the guru does that offends. Talking about male gurus, because mostly it is male gurus. It's very, the comparison between male and female gurus is huge. Non-duality is dominated by males, if you hadn't realised. I'm sure you all have. So normally it is that the guru sleeps with the student or with a young woman, and then you flip into they're a bad teacher, not because you actually feel like that's wrong, but because all your stories that you have in your history of what a mum and dad and an authority figure should be, and also maybe because you feel jealous, or maybe you feel lack or not enough in that they're giving their attention to someone else, whatever story it is in you. And that's another one to notice, and you guys most probably don't suffer from it because you listen to non-duality, but see how it is conditioned non-duality, the fact that it's dominated by males, non-duality, the speakers and the gurus, that that implies that it's a conditioned thing. I mean, some scriptures and some teachers would say, I've heard before it said that only a true teacher can be in a male form, but I personally don't believe that. Or Khaleesi. So it's a conditioning that we have still from many years of patriarchy, which tells us that the leader or the boss or the one with wisdom has to come from male. And normally if you are a non-duality speaker, and it amazes me that I have so many people listening to me and that I've managed to fall out of that exception, it shows that society is really changing. If you're a female speaker of non-duality, you normally have to have a motherly feel to you. So you have to have this motherly, like if you look at the gurus, they've always portrayed as the mother or the mother figure. And it amazes me that I've broken all those boundaries. And maybe I do have a mother feel to me, but Khaleesi, it's awful. But I also don't as well. So it's just showing changes. But it's showing the stories that are in the mind, that it's not objective. Oof. Oh my god. She's never getting cabbage again. Woo! So just when listening to non-duality, the most important thing is not, oh dear goodness, is not the activity of the mind. It's not the activity of what you think about the speaker or what your thoughts are telling you or the intellectual understanding of it. The true non-dual communication is the presence. Not because you're being convinced that they have presence, not because you're being convinced they have presence, but because the heart responds to it. So somebody can look like they have presence. They do the whole beads, 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 white clothes. And they look like they behave with presence, not because of that, but because your heart responds to it. So you can have people that convince you verbally and they're talking you out of yourself about the presence, but feel it, let your heart choose, trust yourself again, not your mind, not your intellect, and go into it and feel it in your heart. And when I say heart, I mean that which directly comes from beingness, from that stillness. I know it's confusing because we're so used to listening to the intellect and the conditioning that it's so real when they pop up, those thoughts and those feelings, so real. Like, are you trying to convince yourself intellectually about something? Are you trying to make excuses about something? So follow those that don't spark your intellect, but that make your heart sing. Don't follow those that are convincing you of something. Now it sounds like I'm convincing you of something. It's so tricky. Okay, we'll take some questions.